Good morning. There's some things been on my mind for a little while, so I just kind of want to toss them out there, see what you think, or maybe you think the same thing. It's concerning all the madness that's going on right now with the Antifa and BLM protests, and it's just uprising of anarchy and the spirit of lawlessness at work. But it's not the first time our nation has seen things like this. It's just escalating even worse. And it has a lot of frontline coverage because of the desire to try to usurp our current establishment, which that's a whole nother issue. I want to talk about the spiritual side of what I think is happening. And so recently, the mayor in Seattle, with it's coming to a close, hopefully, but just a couple of weeks ago, when it was having its front and center focus of the autonomous zone there, the Chaz zone or CHOP zone, whatever they called it, where basically it was a little center there in the city of Seattle where they took over and basically said, well, we're not going to have police here, we're going to do what we want. And they started to see an escalation of crime and what have you. So finally, the mayor decided to do something. But prior to that, she had made this statement that this was a good thing. It was the summer of love. Okay, so when she said that, it made me think, because I've heard that phrase before, and I began to, and I collect things, especially history and things about revival. And summer of love was a phrase used uh, during the height of the hippie movement, you know, there in Hyde Ashbury district in San Francisco. And so just so happens that this year is the 50th anniversary of the Summer of Love. It was a popular cultural thing that took place where thousands of young people, came and descended upon the streets of San Francisco partying, doing drugs, open love, sex, and LSD, and you know, sexuality was very open. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll had its start there, and so. But what is less known is that this began to pave the groundwork for something that God was doing, and yet people didn't realize that, because there in that area there was, street preachers there at Berkeley that were declaring the gospel to all these hippies, and those seeds took root in the hearts of those people. They didn't know it at the time, but it did. And so, a man by the name of Greg Laurie, who was a part of the Jesus People movement here in California, one of the leaders in the Calvary Chapel churches, wrote a book called Jesus Revolution, and he made this statement. He says it was at the height of the Ashbury movement when things began to shift and set the groundwork for the Jesus People movement. He spoke about this particular season, which he saw firsthand, the 60s and the 70s. He noted that the America was in flames in the 60s between the upheaval, turmoil, riots in the streets, young men coming home in body bags from Vietnam. He said there was such chaos in the culture. It was everywhere, and it was collectively overwhelming for the nation. In 1966, Time magazine, the cover of it read these words: "Is God dead?" And they were making that, observation because what they seen in the culture taking place. It was a question that sparked an outrage and a debate, but also a question that encapsulated the sheer chaos of that particular era. In 1968, Martin Luther King, during the height of all this, was also doing some things to counter the deep-rooted racism in the city of Atlanta and the South, and got things going, turned the nation around, and with the civil rights movement. But he was murdered. He was assassinated in 1968, which out of this, the riots and the racial tension escalated throughout the nation. And so that was boiling, in the nation. The hippie movement was boiling in the nation. The Vietnam War was boiling in the nation. All this stuff was going on. And then throw on top of that young people protesting the government, burning flags. There was an incident in Kent State where American military actually were fired upon protesters, and it was a tragic thing that took place. And it was just a high volatile situation, tension all over the country. And then you throw back on the West Coast, the Rolling Stones had a concert, and they hired the Hells Angels of all people to be their security team. And Hells Angels, to say the least, were the epitome of sex, drugs, and rock and roll at the time. And basically, they ended up killing somebody there, and so it really kind of, shocked, the nation. Something like this, a blatant murder at a Rolling Stones concert. And so, in 1971, Laurie in his book noted that Time magazine had another cover, and it was a psychedelic image of Jesus Christ with a text that read, "The Jesus Revolution. Something fascinating happened between 1966 and 1971. It's what they call the spiritual awakening or the Jesus movement." Now, I'm saying that Summer of Love sparked this thought in me because, I'm looking at the nation, and as a Christian, as an evangelist, as someone who tries to win souls and always looking for the opportunity to share the gospel, I see the potential of another awakening. And it is my prayer that God would begin to do this. I think we're seeing the shaking of our nation. I think, understanding that, the Bible prophecy, you don't really read into the fact of America being it. So I think part of the crumbling of America as it is a part of this. But I think the spiritual condition of people right now, because of the anarchy, the lawlessness, the craziness, the supposed racism, and everything, is going on, is setting the tone once again for an awakening. And so I'm believing God for a great season of harvest for us who are praying for revival. So I wanted to leave that with you because I'm believing God for a Holy Ghost revival. And so the Summer of Love could be around the corner. We could be having revival pretty soon. And so I'm contending for it. I'm praying for it, looking forward with great expectation. And so there's nothing greater than what God can do in a moment of time. He can take the shift, the unrest, the craziness, all that's going on, and turn it all around and flip it on the devil and say, you know what, we can get these radical crazies that are out there, protesting, burning things down, stealing, looting, and they could come to a place where they too, like the hippies were, come to a place where they're empty and tired of, realizing, hey, that life is meaningless. And then they begin to flood the churches looking for answers. And I believe the church, if we were careful, can see a reaping, just like they did at the founding of our own fellowship, back in the hippies, when all these hippies started walking to the churches looking for answers. I think we're prying for a fresh wave of revival. So I want to leave you with that. Let's pray, believe God. Until next time, keep on keeping on.